Every story we share is drawn directly from real-life testimonies of people who have faced silent killers and fought their way back to health. These aren't just stories. They are vital lessons in awareness and survival. Subscribe to our channel and join our community today to hear more life-saving experiences that could help you or someone you love. Marcus Thompson had always considered himself invincible. At 42, he ran a successful construction company in Atlanta, worked 60-hour weeks without complaint, and prided himself on never missing a day of work due to illness. His father had been the same way, working until he was 70, and Marcus had inherited that stubborn, resilient streak that made him push through exhaustion, headaches, and the occasional dizzy spell without a second thought. The morning of September 15th started like any other. Marcus woke at 5:30, kissed his sleeping wife Jennifer on the forehead, and headed downstairs to make his usual breakfast of bacon, eggs, and buttered toast with 3 cups of strong black coffee. He scrolled through work emails while he ate, already mentally organizing the day ahead. They had 3 major projects running simultaneously, and he needed to be on site at the Midtown development by 7. As he stood up from the kitchen table, a wave of dizziness washed over him. Marcus gripped the edge of the counter, waiting for the sensation to pass. It wasn't the first time this had happened. Over the past few months, these dizzy spells had become more frequent, but he'd chalk them up to working too hard, not sleeping enough, maybe getting older. Jennifer had noticed him rubbing his temples more often, had commented on the dark circles under his eyes, but Marcus had waved off her concerns with his usual confidence. "I'm fine, Jen. Just tired. I'll slow down after we finish the Peachtree project." But Marcus never slowed down. That was the problem. At the construction site, he climbed scaffolding, reviewed blueprints in the blazing Georgia sun, and settled a dispute between 2 subcontractors, all while ignoring the persistent throb behind his eyes. His foreman, Tommy, had asked him twice if he was feeling all right. Marcus had insisted he was fine, even as sweat poured down his face and his heart hammered in his chest with an intensity that felt wrong, somehow different from normal exertion. By noon, Marcus had consumed his 4th cup of coffee and wolfed down a burger loaded with cheese and bacon from the food truck that parked near the site every day. He loved that burger, the way the grease dripped down his fingers, the salty satisfaction of it. What he didn't think about was his cholesterol, his sodium intake, or the fact that his blood pressure had been creeping upward for years without his knowledge. The afternoon brought more challenges. A concrete delivery was delayed, one of his best carpenters had called in sick, and a client was threatening to walk away from a deal over a cost overrun. Marcus handled it all with his usual take-charge attitude, barking orders, making phone calls, refusing to show weakness. By the time he left the site at 7 that evening, his head was pounding so hard he could barely see straight. Jennifer was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he walked through the door. She took one look at him and set down her knife. "Marcus, you look terrible. Are you feeling okay?" He forced a smile. "Just a headache. Long day. What's for dinner?" "Pot roast with potatoes, but Marcus, seriously, you've had headaches almost every day this week. Maybe you should see Dr. Patterson." Marcus loosened his tie and collapsed into his favorite recliner. "I don't need a doctor. I need a good night's sleep and maybe a couple of aspirin. I'm fine, Jen. Stop worrying." But Jennifer was worried. She'd been worried for months. Her husband had always been a force of nature, but lately he'd seemed different, more irritable, more exhausted, less present even when he was home. She'd noticed him holding on to railings when he climbed stairs, noticed the way he sometimes pressed his hand to his chest as if something hurt. When she'd suggested a checkup, he'd laughed it off, insisting that doctors were for sick people and he was healthy as a horse. That night, Marcus barely touched his dinner. The pot roast that he normally devoured sat largely untouched on his plate. The pounding in his head had intensified, and now there was a strange sensation in his chest, like a tightness that made it hard to take deep breaths. He told Jennifer he was coming down with something, maybe a cold, and headed upstairs to bed at 8:30, unusually early for him. As he lay in the darkness, his mind raced despite his exhaustion. There was so much to do, so many responsibilities. The business depended on him. His crew depended on him. Jennifer and their 2 daughters depended on him. He couldn't afford to be sick, couldn't afford to slow down, couldn't afford to be anything less than the strong, capable man everyone expected him to be. What Marcus didn't know was that his blood pressure had been dangerously high for years. Every salty meal, every stressful day, every skipped checkup had contributed to a silent crisis building inside his body. His arteries were straining, his heart was working overtime, and his kidneys were beginning to show signs of damage. But there had been no dramatic symptoms, no clear warning signs that something was catastrophically wrong. High blood pressure, the doctors would later tell him, was called the silent killer for exactly this reason. It crept up on you, did its damage quietly, and by the time you noticed something was wrong, it was often too late to prevent serious complications. As Marcus drifted into an uneasy sleep, his blood pressure was sitting at 190 over 120, a level considered hypertensive crisis. His body was screaming warnings that he'd learned to ignore, and time was running out. Marcus woke at 3 in the morning with the worst headache of his life. It felt like someone was driving a spike through his skull, a blinding, nauseating pain that made him gasp aloud. Next to him, Jennifer stirred. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "My head," he managed to say, clutching his temples. "God, Jen, my head is killing me." Jennifer sat up and turned on the bedside lamp, squinting in the sudden brightness. When she saw her husband's face, pale and covered in sweat, fear shot through her. "I'm calling 911. "No," Marcus protested weakly. "No ambulance. Just give me some aspirin. I'll be fine." But even as he said it, he knew something was seriously wrong. The pain was unlike anything he'd ever experienced, and now his vision was starting to blur. The room seemed to tilt and spin, and there was a strange numbness creeping down his left arm. Jennifer ignored his protests and grabbed her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed, her voice urgent as she explained to the dispatcher that her husband was having severe head pain and seemed disoriented. The dispatcher asked questions while Jennifer tried to keep Marcus alert, but he was already slipping, his words becoming slurred, his eyes rolling back. The 7 minutes it took for the ambulance to arrive felt like 7 hours. Jennifer held Marcus's hand, talked to him constantly, begged him to stay with her. Their teenage daughters appeared in the doorway, woken by the commotion, their faces frightened. Jennifer tried to sound calm as she told them to get dressed, that they were going to the hospital, that Dad was going to be okay. The paramedics rushed in with practiced efficiency, asking questions, checking vitals, loading Marcus onto a stretcher. Jennifer heard fragments of their communication. BP 200 over 130, possible stroke, need to move fast, and felt her world crumbling. This couldn't be happening. Not to Marcus, not to her strong, healthy husband who never got sick. In the ambulance, one of the paramedics worked to stabilize Marcus while the other called ahead to the emergency room. They'd already started an IV, and Marcus was barely conscious, mumbling incoherently. Jennifer rode in the front, twisting around every few seconds to check on him, her heart hammering with terror. At Grady Memorial Hospital, the emergency room team was waiting. Marcus was rushed through doors marked authorized personnel only, and Jennifer was left standing in a bright, sterile waiting area, clutching her purse and trying not to fall apart. Her daughters sat on either side of her, all three of them silent and scared, waiting for someone to tell them what was happening. Dr. Rachel Chen, the emergency room physician on duty, had seen cases like this before. High blood pressure emergencies were common, especially in men who avoided doctors and ignored symptoms. When she examined Marcus, unconscious now and struggling to breathe on his own, she immediately ordered a CT scan to check for hemorrhagic stroke, bleeding in the brain caused by ruptured blood vessels. The scan confirmed her fears. Marcus had suffered a significant hemorrhagic stroke in the right hemisphere of his brain. The uncontrolled high blood pressure had caused an artery to rupture, flooding his brain tissue with blood and causing dangerous swelling. Dr. Chen called for a neurosurgeon immediately. In the waiting room, a social worker approached Jennifer with the kind of gentle expression that meant bad news was coming. She was led to a private consultation room, her daughters following, all of them bracing for the worst. Dr. Chen entered moments later, still wearing her scrubs, her face serious but compassionate. She sat down across from them and delivered the news with practiced care. "Your husband has had a hemorrhagic stroke caused by severely elevated blood pressure. We need to take him to surgery immediately to relieve the pressure on his brain. I want to be honest with you, this is a very serious situation. The next 24 to 48 hours are critical." Jennifer felt like she was underwater, the doctor's words reaching her through some thick, muffling barrier. Stroke, surgery, critical. These were words that happened to other people, not to her family. But he seemed fine, Jennifer heard herself saying. I mean, he had headaches, but how did we not know? Dr. Chen's expression was understanding. High blood pressure often doesn't have obvious symptoms until it causes a serious event like this. Many people don't know they have it until they have a heart attack, stroke, or kidney failure. Did your husband see a doctor regularly? Jennifer shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. He refused. He always said he was fine, that he didn't have time, that doctors were for sick people. I tried to get him to go, but Marcus was so stubborn. This isn't your fault, Dr. Chen said firmly, but I need you to sign consent forms for the surgery. Every minute counts. Jennifer signed the papers with shaking hands, and then Marcus was gone again, wheeled away to an operating room where surgeons would try to save his life. All she could do was wait and pray and wonder how they'd gotten here, how a normal Tuesday morning had turned into a nightmare. As the hours crawled by, Jennifer thought about all the signs she'd noticed but hadn't pushed hard enough on. The headaches, the fatigue, the shortness of breath, the mood changes. She'd known something was wrong, but she'd let Marcus convince her it was nothing. She'd let him brush off her concerns because he seemed so certain, so confident in his own invincibility. Now he was fighting for his life, and she was left wondering if she'd ever hear his voice again, ever see him walk through the door after a long day at work, ever feel his arms around her. The waiting was agony, each minute stretching into eternity. And all she could do was hold her daughters and pray that it wasn't too late. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours during which Jennifer paced the surgical waiting room, drank bad coffee from vending machines, called family members with updates, and tried to comfort her daughters while falling apart inside. Marcus's mother arrived around dawn, her face drawn with worry, and the two women held each other and cried. When Dr. Patel, the neurosurgeon, finally emerged still wearing his surgical scrubs, Jennifer jumped to her feet. She studied his face, trying to read his expression, trying to prepare herself for whatever he was about to say. The surgery went as well as could be expected, Dr. Patel said, and Jennifer felt her knees go weak with relief. We were able to evacuate the hematoma and relieve the pressure on his brain. But I want to be clear that your husband isn't out of danger yet. The next 72 hours are critical. We need to monitor him closely for additional bleeding, swelling, and seizures. He's in a medically induced coma right now to give his brain time to heal. Jennifer nodded, trying to absorb this information. Marcus was alive. That was what mattered. He was alive. Can I see him? Soon. We're getting him settled in the ICU. A nurse will come get you when he's ready for visitors. The intensive care unit was a place of beeping machines, hushed voices, and an atmosphere of controlled crisis. When Jennifer was finally allowed into Marcus's room, she barely recognized the man in the bed. He was intubated, connected to what seemed like dozens of tubes and wires, his head partially shaved and wrapped in bandages. Machines breathed for him, monitored his vital signs, dripped medications into his veins. Jennifer pulled a chair close to the bed and took his hand, careful not to disturb the IV line. His hand was warm, and she could feel his pulse, steady and strong. She talked to him even though he couldn't hear her, told him about the girls, about how much they needed him, about how he had to fight and come back to them. The days that followed were a blur of medical updates, consultations with various specialists, and long hours sitting by Marcus's bedside. The doctors gradually reduced the sedation, watching for signs that he would wake up on his own. His blood pressure was finally under control, managed by multiple medications, but the damage from years of untreated hypertension was extensive. On the 4th day, Marcus began to show signs of consciousness. His eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. He couldn't speak because of the breathing tube, but he could squeeze Jennifer's hand, and that simple gesture made her cry with relief. Over the next week, they removed the breathing tube, and Marcus began the slow process of recovery. But it quickly became clear that the stroke had taken a serious toll. The right side of his body was significantly weaker than the left. His speech was slurred, and he had trouble finding words. Simple tasks like swallowing required concentration and effort. Dr. Reeves, the neurologist overseeing his care, sat down with Jennifer and Marcus to explain the extent of the damage and the road ahead. The stroke affected the left side of your brain, which controls the right side of your body and impacts speech. You're going to need intensive rehabilitation, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. Some people make remarkable recoveries, but it takes time, often months or even years. And I'll be honest with you, Marcus, you may not regain all of your previous function. Marcus stared at the doctor, his face a mixture of anger, fear, and disbelief. This couldn't be his life now. He'd always been the strong one, the capable one. How was he supposed to run his business if he couldn't even walk without help? Why? He managed to ask, the word thick and difficult. Why me? Dr. Reeves pulled up a chair, her expression compassionate but direct. Your blood pressure had been dangerously high for a long time, probably years. Hypertension damages blood vessels throughout your body. When was the last time you had a physical exam? Marcus couldn't remember. 5 years? 6? Maybe longer. High blood pressure usually doesn't have symptoms, Dr. Reeves continued. That's why it's so dangerous. It's doing damage silently, and by the time you notice something's wrong, there's often already been significant harm to your heart, kidneys, brain, or eyes. Combined with stress, a diet high in sodium and saturated fats, and possibly genetics, it was a perfect storm. Could we have prevented this? Jennifer asked, her voice breaking. If it had been caught earlier, absolutely. Blood pressure is very manageable with lifestyle changes and medication. But without diagnosis and treatment, this is unfortunately a common outcome. The good news is that Marcus is alive and can now manage his condition going forward. But he'll need to take this seriously. Medication compliance, diet changes, stress management, regular monitoring. Marcus closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of regret. All those times Jennifer had urged him to see a doctor. All those moments when he'd felt off but pushed through anyway. All those years of assuming he was fine because he felt fine, not understanding that the deadliest problems were often the ones you couldn't feel until it was too late. After 3 weeks in the hospital, Marcus was transferred to a rehabilitation facility. The place was bright and clean, but it felt like a prison to him. He was used to being in charge, making decisions, solving problems. Now he needed help getting out of bed, getting dressed, going to the bathroom. The humiliation was almost worse than the physical limitations. His physical therapist, a woman named Sandra with seemingly infinite patience, worked with him 3 times a day. They started with basic exercises, lifting his arm, flexing his fingers, trying to take steps between parallel bars. Everything was exhausting. His body felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else, and he was just borrowing it without knowing how it worked. Speech therapy was equally frustrating. Marcus knew what he wanted to say, could hear the words clearly in his mind, but getting them from his brain to his mouth was like trying to run through deep mud. Simple words came out wrong or not at all. Complex thoughts dissolved before he could express them. Jennifer visited every day, bringing news from home, helping him with exercises, reading to him when he was too tired to do anything else. She'd taken over the construction business, working with Tommy to keep projects on track, and Marcus felt another layer of guilt at the burden he'd placed on her shoulders. "I'm sorry," he told her one evening, the words slow but clear. "For what?" "For this. For not listening. For being stupid." Jennifer took his hand, tears in her eyes. "You're not stupid. You're stubborn, which I knew when I married you. What matters is that you're alive and you're fighting. We'll get through this together." But as the weeks turned into months, Marcus struggled with depression. The life he'd known was gone, maybe forever. He couldn't work, couldn't drive, couldn't do a fraction of the things he'd taken for granted. He was supposed to be the provider, the strong one, and instead he was dependent on everyone around him. It was during one particularly dark moment, when Marcus was seriously considering giving up on therapy altogether, that he met Frank. Frank was another stroke survivor, 20 years older than Marcus, who'd had his stroke 5 years earlier. He could walk with a cane now, spoke clearly, lived independently. He sat down next to Marcus in the therapy room one day and shared his story. "First year was hell," Frank said simply. "Wanted to quit every day. Thought my life was over. But then I realized something. I could feel sorry for myself and fade away, or I could fight for every inch of recovery. Sounds like a motivational poster, I know, but it's the truth. You've got to want it, man. You've got to want your life back more than you want to give up. Something in Frank's words struck deep. Marcus realized he'd been so focused on what he'd lost that he hadn't been fighting for what he could still have. That night, he made a decision. He was going to work harder than he'd ever worked in his life. Not for construction projects or business deals, but for himself and his family. The road ahead was long, but for the first time since the stroke, Marcus felt something that had been missing: hope. 3 months into rehabilitation, Marcus could walk short distances with a cane. His speech had improved significantly, though he still struggled with complex sentences when he was tired. His right hand remained weaker than his left, limiting what he could do. But he could button his own shirts now, feed himself without assistance, and had even managed to type a few emails to clients, apologizing for his absence and assuring them the business was in good hands. Every small victory felt monumental. The first time he walked down the hallway without assistance, Sandra cheered like he'd won a marathon. The first morning he woke up and remembered a complicated word without searching for it, he called Jennifer immediately to tell her. These moments of progress kept him going through the grueling hours of therapy and the frustrating setbacks that seemed to come without warning. But recovery wasn't linear. Some days Marcus would wake up feeling strong, confident that he was getting better. Other days, his body refused to cooperate, his words wouldn't come, and the crushing weight of his new reality would settle over him like a suffocating blanket. On those days, he leaned heavily on the support group at the rehab center, a collection of stroke survivors at various stages of recovery who understood what he was going through in ways his family couldn't. It was in one of these support group meetings that Marcus truly began to understand the broader implications of his condition. A woman named Patricia, who'd had a stroke at 55, talked about how she'd ignored her high blood pressure for a decade, despite her doctor's warnings. "I took the pills when I remembered," she said, "but I didn't really believe anything bad would happen. I felt fine. I thought the doctors were just being overly cautious. Then one day I couldn't move the left side of my body. Now I'm here, learning to walk again, and I'd give anything to go back and take those pills every single day." Marcus saw himself in every one of these stories: the denial, the invincibility complex, the belief that bad things happen to other people. A man named Robert shared how he'd had 3 strokes, each one worse than the last, because he kept going back to his old habits after recovering. A younger woman named Amy talked about having a stroke at 38, shocking everyone. But genetic testing revealed a family history of hypertension she'd never known about. Dr. Simmons, the cardiologist who'd taken over Marcus's care after the acute crisis, had become something of a mentor to him. During one of their regular check-ins, the doctor pulled up Marcus's chart and showed him the numbers that had nearly killed him. Before your stroke, your blood pressure was consistently above 180 over 110. Normal is 120 over 80 or lower. You were in what we call stage 2 hypertension, which significantly increases your risk of heart attack, stroke, kidney disease, and other serious complications. Now, with medication and lifestyle changes, we've got you down to about 130 over 85, which is much better but still needs improvement. Marcus looked at the numbers, finally understanding what they meant. "How long was it that high?" Dr. Simmons consulted the records. "Based on your age, risk factors, and the extent of damage we've seen, I'd estimate your blood pressure has been elevated for at least 5 to 7 years, possibly longer." 7 years. 7 years of silent damage to his body, 7 years of opportunities to catch it and fix it, all wasted because he'd been too proud or too busy or too stubborn to see a doctor. "What else should I know?" Marcus asked. "About the damage, I mean." Dr. Simmons appreciated the question. Too many patients didn't want to hear the full truth. "Your kidneys are showing signs of chronic stress from the high blood pressure. They're functioning, but not optimally. Your heart is slightly enlarged from working too hard. We're monitoring both closely. The good news is that with proper management, we can prevent further damage and maybe even allow some healing. But Marcus, you need to understand, this is a chronic condition now. You'll be on blood pressure medication for the rest of your life. You'll need regular monitoring, and you absolutely must make lifestyle changes." The lifestyle changes were harder than Marcus had anticipated. The nutritionist who visited the rehab center had systematically dismantled his diet. No more bacon and eggs every morning. No more burgers dripping with grease. The salt shaker was now his enemy, something to be avoided. She introduced him to a DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and lean proteins. Think of food as medicine, she explained. What you put in your body directly affects your blood pressure. Too much sodium makes your body retain fluid, which increases blood volume and pressure. Potassium helps balance sodium and relax blood vessel walls. Omega-3 fatty acids reduce inflammation. Every meal is a choice. You can choose to help your body heal or choose to make things worse. Jennifer embraced the new diet wholeheartedly, transforming their kitchen. She bought cookbooks focused on heart-healthy eating, experimented with herbs and spices instead of salt, and discovered that healthy food could actually taste good. Marcus was skeptical at first, mourning his burgers and bacon, but gradually his palate adjusted. The first time he actually enjoyed a grilled salmon with lemon and herbs, he was surprised at himself. Exercise was another crucial component, though Marcus had to start small. His physical therapist designed a program that would gradually build his strength and cardiovascular health without overtaxing his recovering body. They started with gentle walks, then added swimming, which was easier on his joints and allowed him to work his weakened side without gravity fighting him. But perhaps the hardest change was mental. The construction business had been Marcus's identity, and accepting that he couldn't return to his old role required a fundamental reimagining of who he was. Jennifer and Tommy were running things well, but it wasn't the same. Marcus felt lost without the daily challenges of the job site, the satisfaction of solving problems, the pride of building something tangible. His therapist, Dr. Morrison, helped him work through these feelings in their weekly sessions. "You're mourning," she explained. "You've lost the life you had, and even though you're building a new one, that loss is real and needs to be acknowledged. But here's what I want you to think about. Who is Marcus Thompson without the business? What matters to you beyond work?" The question haunted him. For so long, work had been everything. He'd missed dance recitals, family dinners, vacations, all in service of building his company. Now with work stripped away, what was left? He started spending more time with his daughters, really talking to them, learning about their lives in a way he never had before. His older daughter Maya was applying to colleges, and Marcus found himself invested in the process, actually reading the applications with her, discussing her essays, sharing his thoughts in a way he'd never made time for before the stroke. His younger daughter Sophie was struggling with anxiety, something Marcus hadn't fully appreciated until now. He began attending her therapy sessions with her, learning about mental health, understanding how his own avoidance of vulnerability had maybe contributed to her struggles with expressing her feelings. Jennifer watched her husband slowly transform, becoming more present, more emotionally available, more willing to ask for help and admit when he was struggling. Sometimes, she told him one evening as they sat together on the porch, "I wonder if the stroke was the universe's way of making you stop and realize what actually matters." Marcus squeezed her hand, still weak but improving. "Worst lesson I've ever learned," he said, "but probably the most important." 8 months after the stroke, Marcus returned home permanently. The house had been modified: grab bars in the bathroom, a ramp at the front entrance, furniture rearranged to make navigation easier. It felt both familiar and foreign, like returning to a place you once knew well, but had been changed in your absence. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Marcus was more independent now, but still needed help with certain tasks. Jennifer had cut back her hours at the business to be home more, and they developed new routines together. Morning medication at 7:30, breakfast that now featured oatmeal with berries instead of bacon, morning walks around the neighborhood, afternoon therapy sessions at an outpatient clinic. Marcus's speech had recovered remarkably well. Most people who met him now wouldn't know he'd had a stroke, though those who knew him before could detect the slight hesitation when he was searching for a word. The way his sentences were simpler than they used to be. His mobility was good. He could walk without assistance, though he still used a cane for longer distances or when he was tired. The construction company had evolved in his absence. Jennifer had proven to be an excellent manager, and Tommy had stepped up as project lead. Together, they not only kept the business running, but had landed 2 major new contracts. When Marcus finally returned to the office, it was in a different capacity, consultant and advisor rather than hands-on manager. It was hard letting go of that control, but he was learning that delegation wasn't defeat. What surprised Marcus most was how much his perspective had changed. The things that used to seem critical, winning every bid, beating every deadline, maximizing every profit margin, now felt less important than they once had. He still cared about the business, but he cared more about having dinner with his family, being there when Sophie needed to talk, watching Maya prepare for college. He'd become an advocate in unexpected ways. Dr. Simmons asked him to speak at a community health fair about the importance of blood pressure screening. Marcus agreed, nervous but determined. Standing in front of a small crowd, sharing his story, he felt vulnerable in a way he never had before. "I thought I was healthy," he told the audience. "I worked hard, provided for my family, never got sick. But I was ignoring all the warning signs: headaches, fatigue, dizziness. I told myself I was just working too hard, that I'd rest later, that I didn't have time for doctors. I was wrong, and it almost killed me." He showed them pictures from the hospital, his head wrapped in bandages, tubes and wires everywhere. He saw people in the audience shift uncomfortably, recognizing themselves in his story. High blood pressure doesn't hurt. You can't feel it doing damage. That's why they call it the silent killer. I'm one of the lucky ones. I survived and I'm recovering. But I'll never be exactly who I was before. The stroke took that away permanently. All because I didn't know my numbers. Didn't take 15 minutes to get checked. Didn't think it could happen to me. After the talk, a man in his 50s approached Marcus. "I've been having headaches for months," he admitted. "My wife keeps telling me to see a doctor, but I keep putting it off. I work in construction too. Always something more urgent to deal with." Marcus looked at him seriously. "Make the appointment tomorrow. Right now, actually. Pull out your phone and make the appointment before you leave here. Your wife wants you around. Your kids want you around. Don't make them go through what my family went through." The man nodded, already pulling out his phone. Marcus watched him make the call, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't expected. If his experience could save even one person from going through what he'd endured, then maybe there was meaning in his suffering. At home, Marcus had become meticulous about managing his health. Every morning he checked his blood pressure and recorded it in a journal. He took his medications without fail: 2 pills for blood pressure, 1 for cholesterol, and aspirin for clotting prevention. He'd memorized his numbers the way he used to memorize project budgets. Blood pressure goal under 130/80, LDL cholesterol under 100, weight around 185 pounds. The nutritionist's visit 3 months post-discharge had been eye-opening. She'd calculated that his pre-stroke diet contained an average of 5,000 milligrams of sodium per day, more than double the recommended amount. Now he aimed for 4,500 milligrams, carefully reading labels, choosing fresh foods over processed ones, cooking at home instead of grabbing fast food. Exercise had become a non-negotiable part of his routine. Every morning he walked 2 miles, gradually building up his endurance. 3 times a week he attended a cardiac rehabilitation class at the hospital, working out under medical supervision alongside other heart patients and stroke survivors. The community aspect helped. These were people who understood the fear of your own body betraying you, the frustration of rebuilding from scratch. Maya left for college in August, and Marcus surprised himself by crying as they said goodbye. The old Marcus would have kept his emotions locked down, would have given her a firm handshake and practical advice about time management. The new Marcus hugged her tight, told her he loved her, and promised to visit often. "You've changed, Dad," Maya said as they stood by her dorm room, boxes everywhere. "I mean, I hate why it happened, but I like that you're more here, present." "I wasted a lot of time," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not going to waste any more." Sophie thrived with her father's increased attention. They developed a ritual of Saturday morning breakfast where they cooked together, usually something heart-healthy, but occasionally indulging in whole wheat pancakes with fresh fruit. She'd started opening up more about her anxiety, and Marcus had learned to listen without trying to immediately fix everything, just being there as support. Jennifer had told him she was proud of him, which made Marcus tear up more than he cared to admit. "You could have given up," she said. "You could have let this break you, but you fought and you've become a better person through it." "I know that sounds terrible. Like I'm glad you had a stroke, but—" "I know what you mean," Marcus interrupted. I'm not glad it happened, but I'm glad about who I'm becoming because of it. 1 year after the stroke, Marcus returned to Dr. Simmons for his annual checkup. The news was good. His blood pressure was consistently well controlled, his kidney function had stabilized, his heart showed no signs of further damage. The doctor pulled up comparison scans, showing Marcus the healed area of his brain where the hemorrhage had occurred. "You've done remarkable work," Dr. Simmons said. "Your recovery has been better than most stroke survivors at your level of severity. But I want to be clear, you can never go back to your old habits. This is a lifelong commitment to managing your health." "I understand," Marcus said, and he meant it. That evening, Marcus sat on the back porch with Jennifer, watching the sunset. It had become one of his favorite times of day, these quiet moments of just being together. His right hand, still slightly weaker than his left, held hers. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" Jennifer asked. "Before the stroke, I mean. Back to normal." Marcus thought about it carefully. "Parts of it, yes. I miss being able to do everything I used to do physically. I miss not having to think about every meal, every medication, every doctor's appointment. But normal, that version of me was killing himself and didn't even know it. I was stressed, exhausted, disconnected from the people I love. I don't want that back." He looked at his wife, this woman who'd stood by him through the worst experience of his life, who'd taken over his business, managed his care, held him when he cried in frustration over therapy setbacks. "I want this," he said simply. "This life, right here, with you, with the girls, with time to actually live instead of just work." The stroke took a lot from me, but it also gave me something I didn't know I was missing: perspective. Jennifer leaned her head on his shoulder, both of them watching as the sky turned from orange to pink to deep purple. "You scared me, you know. When I thought I might lose you, I realized we'd been living like we had all the time in the world. Like there would always be another chance to slow down, to connect, to really be present with each other." "I know," Marcus said quietly. "I'm sorry for that." "Don't be sorry. Just keep being this version of you, the one who checks his blood pressure every morning, who takes his walks, who sits with Sophie when she's anxious, who video calls Maya every week. That's the Marcus I want to grow old with." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, the sounds of the neighborhood settling in around them, children playing in distant yards, cars pulling into driveways, the chirp of crickets beginning their evening song. It was ordinary and unremarkable, and Marcus had never been more grateful for anything in his life. The next morning, Marcus stood in the bathroom, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around his arm as he did every day. The numbers appeared on the digital screen: 122/78. Perfect. He recorded them in his journal, noting how he'd slept, what he'd eaten the day before, how he was feeling. This ritual had become second nature, a small act of self-care that kept him accountable and alive. As he headed downstairs, he found Jennifer already in the kitchen, preparing their breakfast. The smell of whole wheat toast and fresh berries filled the air, along with the rich aroma of coffee. Decaf now, but Marcus had grown to appreciate it just as much. "Morning," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "Sleep well?" "Like a rock. Blood pressure's good." "I'm glad." They ate together, discussing the day ahead. Marcus had a phone meeting with Tommy about a potential new project, then physical therapy in the afternoon. Jennifer was meeting with their accountant, then picking Sophie up from school. Simple, everyday plans, the kind Marcus used to take for granted or try to squeeze in between more important things. After breakfast, Marcus took his morning walk. The neighborhood was familiar now. He knew which houses had dogs that barked, which neighbors were early risers like him, where the best shade was on hot days. He walked at a steady pace, his cane mostly for show now, but still useful when his right leg got tired. Halfway through his route, he passed the local community center where a health screening event was being set up. A banner read, "Know your numbers, free blood pressure checks." Marcus stopped, watching as volunteers arranged tables and chairs, set up equipment, prepared information packets. A woman approached him, clipboard in hand. "Good morning. We're doing free health screenings today. Blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar. Would you be interested?" Marcus smiled and held up his cane. "I'm all set, thanks. Had a stroke last year. I know my numbers better than I know my own phone number now." The woman's expression shifted to one of understanding and respect. "I'm glad you're taking care of yourself. Not everyone gets a second chance. No, they don't, Marcus agreed, which is why everyone should come get checked today. You don't want to wait until it's too late. As he continued his walk, Marcus thought about how many people in this neighborhood were probably like he'd been, thinking they were fine, ignoring symptoms, putting off checkups, believing that bad things happen to other people. How many of them were walking around right now with dangerously high blood pressure, not knowing they were one stressful day away from a heart attack or stroke? When he got home, Marcus called Dr. Simmons. "I want to do more," he told his doctor. "The talk at the health fair helped someone. At least one person I know of made an appointment because of my story. I want to reach more people. What can I do?" Dr. Simmons was quiet for a moment, then said, "Let me make some calls. I think I know exactly what you can do." 2 weeks later, Marcus found himself sitting across from a producer at a local news station. They wanted to do a segment on stroke awareness, focusing on the importance of knowing your blood pressure and recognizing warning signs. Marcus would be the face of the campaign, sharing his story, urging people to get checked. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the producer asked. "It's pretty personal, sharing something like this publicly." Marcus thought about the man at the health fair who'd made an appointment. He thought about Patricia and Robert and Amy from his support group, all of them wishing they'd known sooner. He thought about Jennifer, Maya, and Sophie, and how close they'd come to losing each other. "I'm sure," he said, "if my story can save even one life, it's worth being vulnerable." The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. Marcus watched it with his family, feeling exposed and uncomfortable seeing himself on television, hearing his own voice recounting the worst night of his life. But the response was overwhelming. The station received dozens of calls from viewers saying they were going to make doctor's appointments, check their blood pressure, take their medications more seriously. One call particularly moved Marcus. A woman named Rebecca left a message saying her husband had been having headaches for months, but refused to see a doctor. After watching the segment, he'd agreed to go to urgent care. They discovered his blood pressure was 210/120, higher than Marcus's had been the night of his stroke. He was immediately treated and admitted for observation, potentially preventing a catastrophic event. "You might have saved my husband's life," Rebecca said through tears on the voicemail. "Thank you for being brave enough to share your story." Marcus played the message for Jennifer that evening, and they both cried. All the pain, all the struggle, all the months of grueling rehabilitation. If it meant Rebecca's husband got to avoid what Marcus had gone through, it was worth it. Over the following months, Marcus became more involved in stroke awareness advocacy. He joined the American Heart Association, participated in community events, and even helped develop educational materials for primary care physicians to give to patients about blood pressure management. He discovered a sense of purpose he'd never found in construction, meaningful work that connected him to people in profound ways. His business continued to thrive under Jennifer and Tommy's leadership, and Marcus gradually accepted that his role had changed permanently. He consulted on major decisions, reviewed plans and budgets, but the day-to-day operations belonged to others now. It was okay. More than okay, it was right. Sophie's anxiety improved with therapy and her father's steady presence. Maya thrived at college, calling home regularly to share her experiences and ask for advice. Jennifer and Marcus grew closer than they'd been in years, rediscovering each other now that Marcus wasn't consumed by work. On the one-year anniversary of his stroke, Marcus returned to Grady Memorial Hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor. He brought flowers for the ICU nurses who'd cared for him, donuts for the emergency room staff, and a heartfelt thank you card for Dr. Chen, whose quick action had saved his life. "I wanted you to see that your work mattered," he told the gathered staff. "I'm one of the lucky ones who gets to come back and say thank you. I get to watch my daughters grow up, grow old with my wife, and hopefully help other people avoid ending up in the ICU like I did." Dr. Chen, normally composed and professional, had tears in her eyes. "This is why we do what we do," she said. "Thank you for coming back, Marcus. Thank you for showing us the happy ending." As Marcus left the hospital that day, walking confidently with his cane, he felt a sense of completion. He'd survived something that killed many people. He'd worked harder in his recovery than he'd ever worked on any construction project. He'd transformed his life, his priorities, his very understanding of what it meant to be alive. His phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Dinner at 6. Sophie made your favorite. Grilled chicken with that lemon herb thing you like. Dad, I'm proud of you. Marcus smiled, reading the message twice. His daughter was proud of him, not for building a successful business or making money or being strong in the traditional sense, but for being vulnerable, for taking care of himself, for choosing to live. He texted back, "On my way home, I love you." As he drove through the familiar streets of Atlanta, Marcus thought about the question Jennifer had asked him on the porch that evening. Did he wish he could go back to before the stroke? The answer was still no. The old Marcus had been sleepwalking through life, measuring success by all the wrong metrics, slowly killing himself and calling it strength. The new Marcus was awake, present, and genuinely alive for the first time in decades. High blood pressure had nearly killed him, but in a strange way, it had also saved him, forcing him to stop, to change, to choose life over the slow suicide of chronic stress and neglect. He would never get back everything the stroke had taken from him. His right hand would always be a little weaker. Words would sometimes escape him when he was tired. He would take medications every day for the rest of his life, check his blood pressure each morning, watch his sodium intake, and live with the knowledge that his body had betrayed him once and could do so again. But he also had something he'd never truly had before: gratitude for ordinary moments, deep connections with the people he loved, and the wisdom to know that being alive meant more than just having a heartbeat. It meant showing up, being present, taking care of yourself so you could take care of others. As Marcus pulled into his driveway and saw the warm light from his kitchen window, saw Jennifer moving around inside preparing dinner, saw Sophie's backpack thrown carelessly by the door, he felt something he'd been too busy to feel in his old life: contentment. He was home. He was healthy enough. He was loved and loving. He had learned the hardest possible way that tomorrow is not guaranteed, that your body will give you warnings if you're willing to listen, and that the most important numbers in your life aren't quarterly earnings or project deadlines. They're 120 over 80, the blood pressure reading that meant you might get to wake up tomorrow and do this all again. Marcus Thompson had almost died because he didn't know he had high blood pressure. But he had survived, and now he spent his days making sure other people didn't make the same mistake. In the end, his greatest construction project wasn't a building at all. It was rebuilding himself, one small choice at a time, into someone who understood that true strength meant knowing when to ask for help, when to slow down, and when to simply be grateful for another unremarkable, beautiful day of being alive.